Welcome to Breaking Bread. I'm Staci Smith, your host. Today, our guest is Dr. Travis Bristol. We are so happy to have him here with us today. He is joining us as an associate professor of teacher education and education policy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
At UC Berkeley. And we're going to have him be one of our speakers at our spring symposium. So we just wanted to have a moment to chat with you. Welcome, Dr. Bristol.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Ms. Smith. So good to be here.
Stacey.
So good to be here. Well, Ms. Smith, because I've known you in my life as Ms. Smith, because
Yes.
you were my son's 8th grade teacher. So, but Stacy.
For this context,
Yes.
we're breaking bread.
Yes.
We're having just a
Yes.
chance to chat and
Yes.
share. One of the themes of our interaction with everyone in Kingmakers of Oakland is to just think of the context of who you are and whose you are. So as you come to us today, we'd love to just hear your rendition of that for yourself. Tell us about your process to get to where you are today, but just first, just a snippet of who are you and how did you get to this point? And how do you just claim your space in the world?
I appreciate that. I am a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm a grandson. I'm a teacher. I believe that a part of my life's work is to bring folks who have been historically at the margins to the center. So that's how I, understand who I am. And I believe that I am also connected to, and I'm here because of the sacrifices of parents and grandparents who struggled much, who did not have the kinds of opportunities I've had to be at this table with you today. And so I am also, those are the individuals to whom I also belong.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I hear within that, whose you are
Yeah.
is the people that love you, the people that you
Yeah.
represent, and the sacrifice is such an important factor because none of us got to where we are, but by those who came before us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of leads in, and it might tie even to what you have mentioned already, but what is your passion and how does that align with the work you're doing now?
Yeah. So some of the work, so I am, my day job, I'm faculty member at UC Berkeley in the School of Education. And my work there focuses on supporting teachers of color, both in thinking about what's happening in schools to also ensure that what's happening in schools can also allow them to stay. And I focus on teachers, and teachers of color in particular, because that work is done in service of students, right? So the outcomes that I'm interested in are really affecting students, but I believe that teachers close their doors to the noise, to the policymakers, to maybe even a principal who may be ineffective. But teachers close their doors and they create the conditions in their classrooms to allow students to thrive or to not be successful. And so I focus on teachers and thinking about how we can support teachers in service of students, our students. And I do this in particular focusing on teachers of color, right? Lots of this clear, the evidence is clear that teachers of color, Black teachers, right, increase outcomes for students. And it's less, and so lots of my work has been focused on how do we support those teachers? How do we give them tools to be successful? How do we create or lower the challenges that may not allow them to be successful? And I do that across a various range of programs, but I'm happy to talk more about that. But that's essentially the work that I, as a faculty member, that's the kind of work that I'm focused on.
That's beautiful. Having been a teacher who had to close the doors myself.
Mm.
As we describe it here at Kingmakers, it's the toxic ecosystem,
Mm.
and we want to inoculate the pond for the students.
Mm-hmm.
But there is that factor of,
Yeah.
for Black teachers,
Yeah.
they need that same level of
Yeah.
somebody see me, help me, because I'm drowning in this system that's anti-Blackness,
Yeah.
anti-supporting Black students to be successful, and it is a make or break. You create the environment. So
Yeah.
what you're doing is so invaluable and
Yeah.
so tangible,
Yeah.
and very much in alignment with the work that we're doing. So
Yeah.
it's just such a pleasure to share this space and break bread with you
Yes.
over this topic
Yes.
because it's so real.
Yeah.
So how did you end up in this space? How did you get into this line of work? What was the progression? You still identify as a teacher, so I love that. And
Yeah.
that becomes an identity.
Yeah. I mean, the work starts from my own K-12 schooling experience. So I'm from Brooklyn, East New York, Brooklyn. And, you know, when you think about East New York, Brooklyn, you should think East St. Louis, East Oakland, East Palo Alto. I mean,
Always.
the East, right? East San Diego. So I grew up in Brooklyn, particularly East New York, Brooklyn, and I went to a private K-6 Afrocentric elementary school. I tell the story time and time again, in this first grade, I'm dating myself here, like I remember my teacher, Miss Marshall, Black woman, helping us write letters to the South African government to free Nelson Mandela. I remember in the first grade learning about Crispus Attucks,
Wow.
that this country's founding was because a Black man shed his blood for what would become the United States of America. I learned about Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman. So that was my experience. I remember also in the first grade learning the story about the transatlantic slave trade was one that the fittest survived. And so I was a descendant of individuals who were strong because I survived. I mean, so that was the frame. I still remember across our schools those pictures of like the kings and queens of Africa. I mean, so that was my K-12, that was my K-6 schooling experience. And then in middle school, I went to a public school, and it was in the 7th grade. It was the first time that I heard that Christopher Columbus discovered America. I had never heard that. That was not part of my K-6 schooling experience. And I think that early experience going to that Afrocentric school that still exists, it's called New Grace Center, that still exists, is what gave me sort of a positive sense of self that has helped me navigate a world that is violently Eurocentric and that does not have the capacity to understand and see and honor Black brilliance. So go to that K-6 school, then I go to high school, then I go to middle school and high school. In high school I went to large. My high school had about 2,300 students in Lower Manhattan. The school was predominantly Black and Latinx with a few Asian American students. In the most diverse city probably in the world, New York City,
Yes.
the first time I had a white classmate was when I went to college.
Wow.
The high school I went to had metal detectors. My first interaction with school was having the airport. I had to walk through and had to have my bag scanned. So that was my experience.
Wow.
And then I go to this small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, Amherst College. That was, there were no bells telling me to move. There was no line in the middle of the hallway directing me and my folks, my classmates, my schoolmates, which side of the hallway to walk. And I experienced school as being quite different. And in that school, I was, one of few. I wanted to become a lawyer because I was a Pell Grant student.
Mm-hmm.
My mother retired about last year after teaching for about 45 years as a preschool teacher.
Wow.
When I went to Amherst College, my tuition was more than what my mother made because she was a preschool teacher. And you know how we in preschools, Black and Latinx women particularly are underpaid. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to become a lawyer, but in my freshman year, I took this course on like reading and writing and understanding urban schools. And I realized that what I was experiencing in my high school in New York City was actually similar to Black and brown children in urban centers across the country, and so I decided to maybe think about a career in teaching. I see this advertisement for a scholarship for folks to get a full ride or to get much of their teaching credential subsidized, and so I decided to come to Stanford. I had never been to California, and so I said, let me try out this education thing, I'll come out to California. Came to California, got my teacher credential and master's at the Stanford Teacher Education Program. I'll pause here and say that in the teacher credential program, I failed the teacher credential tests countless times. And I often say this, I chair our state's, among the things I do, because I'm a Black man, I have way too many jobs, some of which I'm compensated for, but one of the things I do voluntarily is I chair our state's Education Diversity Advisory Group out of Tony Thurman's office. And I've said this, right, that here I am, a tenured professor at UC Berkeley, relatively strong institution, degrees from lots of places, quote unquote prestigious places, and yet I failed the teacher certification exam. And so when we think about what it means to struggle with standardized tests, I want to be the poster child for that, because I had to learn over time that it was not a reflection of my brilliance, but because of the educational neglect that I suffered by going to a high school where my 8th grade teacher did crossword puzzles and didn't teach me.
Yeah.
Right? So when we're thinking about, I think there's a role for teacher certification exams. We can talk about that later, but my struggles with those tests was because of the trauma from experiencing educational neglect as being a high schooler in a public school system that disinvested in me and invested in, on average, people who did not look like me. So fast forward, I come back to New York City and I taught high school English for 5 years at 2 different schools. Similar to the work that you all are doing here at Kingmakers, in my 3rd year, I noticed that lots of Black and brown students, boys in particular, were being suspended and having detention. So I started this after-school program for them. One of the things that I learned from this after-school program, the students the young men in my class, they did well, and they continued to do well in my class, but they still struggled when they went to my colleagues. And what I recognized that part of the theory of action was actually flawed, because I was taking them, doing work with them, and they were returning back to this ecosystem, and they were still struggling.
And the toxicity they're in.
The toxicity that they were in. And it wasn't actually them. It was my colleagues who needed some support. Yes, they needed some mentoring, but my colleagues needed some support. So that's a long answer to how I've arrived.
Please join us for an extraordinary 3-day experience at our Spring Symposium 2024. This year's theme is Black Love is Liberation. Our premier leadership development conference brings education and community leaders from around the country to network with others, learn new impactful strategies, and bring those solutions back to your respective schools and communities. Educators, parents, and community leaders, you can register now.
It wasn't long because it covered all the relevant areas, right? The trauma, first the identity, the trauma, the transitions from different types of learning environments that framed how you saw yourself. Being elevated in grades 1 through 6 and learning the things that we teach through our curriculum and our interaction with young people, the unlearning that didn't have to happen for you. Even though the negativity was layered on top of it, you still had a foundation of believing, as we do, that Black boys are brilliant and genius in their own right, just by being here on the planet.
Yes.
And the strength of the ancestors whose backs you stand on. This is what I'm just playing back to you what I heard because it's so relevant in this work and what the need is for teachers and the ecosystem, the spaces in which we ask our children to thrive, sets the tone.
Yeah.
Up to the point of well educated, but still can't pass these tests, mostly because of the insidious innuendos of how they're even made
Yeah. Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
scream failure.
Yeah.
Because it's not how you think, it's not how you speak and frame your communication, but it has no reflection of your knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I applaud you for sharing that and for pushing through,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's the difference maker, to know that the unique relationships, the unique needs of our students
Yeah.
that you're teaching their teachers to address
Yeah.
is the difference maker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I would add, and I think to this point that you made, that I pushed through, and there were some conditions created to allow me to push through. So when I was in my teacher education program at Stanford, Linda Darling-Hammond, who now
Oh, yes.
chairs the state board, ran that program, and Linda said, well, we're going to get Travis some support. So Linda created the conditions. So I did my work, and the conditions were created that allowed me to push through. Yeah, I think that's just important, that it wasn't just superhuman effort. Right?
correct.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the community.
Yes. Yeah,
That none of us does this alone. Back to what we said at the very beginning
Yeah.
about our ancestors, but also
Yeah.
now the other people in the work, which is why we want you to be a speaker at the symposium.
Yeah.
Because we want people to hear from you that are in this work. Because I think when you're the only one, you get the sense that this is hopeless. I'm here by myself.
Yeah.
Nobody gets me. Because the people you're with in that space are disconnected, and they don't need to have the awareness because it doesn't affect them the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the beauty of community and coming together in the space
Yeah.
like the Spring Symposium,
Yeah.
it is to feel that sense of, When I went to an HBCU after being the only black child in elementary school, I finally got to breathe at school
Yeah.
because everybody looked like me.
Yeah.
And so there was not that sense of what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so even thinking ahead along those types of lines, what's the legacy impact that you want to leave? You've talked about your ancestry, but now you're the ancestor. What is the legacy you want to leave when you get to that place?
There's a old song of the church on this Good Friday about, if I can help somebody travel along this road, then I know that my living will not be in vain.
Yes.
And so, at UC Berkeley, I recently launched this center around creating the Center for Research for Expanding Educational Opportunity. And so I think the legacy will be, how do I identify within schools, organizations, structures that make it challenging for students and adults who have been at the margins what's made it challenging for them to move from the margins to the center. If I can identify what those structural barriers are, then then I can identify how to create opportunities for those adults and students who are at the margins to move from the margins to the center. So I think that what I'd want is my work this legacy, to use your, be focused on giving folks the laces so that they can use to pull themselves up, right?
After all, we made the shoelace
Yes.
machine anyway, so use it.
I like that. Yes, yes.
So what insights would you share with those that come behind you? You're talking about leaving the breadcrumbs and laying the laces out. What's the insights? What are the steps that you would encourage people to know and to apply in this work toward this space?
So one, that we are brilliant, full stop. And that we are as people of African descent, living, working, attending, learning in environments that by their design,
Yes.
that by their design have not been built to allow us to have life, liberty, and pursue happiness. That by their construction.
Yes.
And yet, there is evidence that we have been able to thrive in those spaces.
Yes.
And the way that we do that is that we work in community, that we identify somebody who has been in the way and we've said, can you help me? I need help. And we find others who are behind us and we say, how can I support you? Here's what I've learned. And so I think that's what I think will be important for individuals who are in this space around how to navigate it. That by design we were not. There was no expectation that we would thrive. We've thrived in spite of, and we've done that because we've identified folks who are, who might be skin folk or folks who may not be, who can support us. And we've looked back to support others.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. We can talk. I can talk all day on these things because there's so many connections and stories.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up our time together, thank you for breaking bread with us.
Thank you. It's been
an honor. Thank you for your time. It's been my honor as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bristol.
Thank you, Staci.
Is there anything you'd like our guests that are watching us to know how to reach you, other than coming to the Spring Symposium and hearing you?
Yeah, quick Google search. You can find more of my work on my faculty webpage at UC Berkeley.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Breakin Bread. I'm your host, Staci Smith, and our guest today, Dr. Travis Bristol. Come to the Spring Symposium. You've heard this amazing conversation. If you want to hear more, if you want a chance to glean from his insights, his experience, his expertise, come hear what else he has to say.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Greetings, my name is Chris Chapman, founder and CEO of Kingmakers of Oakland. Please join us for an extraordinary 3-day experience at our Spring Symposium 2024. This year's theme is Black Love is Liberation. Our premier leadership development conference brings education and community leaders from around the country to network with others, learn new impactful strategies, and bring those solutions back to your respective schools and communities. This dynamic event is meticulously crafted to engage, encourage, and empower a multiracial, intergenerational, and cross-sector community passionately devoted to the holistic development of Black youth, while ensuring excellence for all students. The dynamic speakers and engaging workshops equip you with the information, tools, and skills to be recognized as an impactful leader from the classroom to the boardroom and throughout the community. By building with like-minded individuals, you will feel supported and leave refreshed to be a champion for your students and families. Educators, parents, and community leaders, you can register now. We are excited to see you in Oakland, April 25th through the 27th for the Spring Symposium where Black Love is Liberation. For more information, please check us out at kingmakersofoakland.org or come check us out at 1035 7th Street, Cool Labs Design Center Production House, Oakland, California. Thank you for watching. I'm Chris Chapman, and have a great day the Kingmakers way.